of Jonah in the Old Testament is a short story. It contains all the key elements that are characteristic of any good short story: character, setting, conflict, plot, and theme. The key character, of course, is Jonah, to whom the word of the Lord came, telling him to go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it. And this set up an internal conflict within Jonah. For Nineveh, you see, was the capital of the very nation that destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel and subjugated Israel for 100 years. God was asking Jonah to go and prophesy to the enemy. Both Jonah and God agreed that the people of Nineveh were wicked. What they did not agree on was what should be done about it. Therefore, Jonah ran away from God. He boarded a ship headed for Tarshish, which was about as far away as you could get from anywhere back then. But of course, you can't really run away from God. A terrible storm arose while they were still at sea. The captain of the ship woke Jonah up and implored him, "Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us so that we will not perish." As the storm raged on, the sailors cast lots, in accordance with their own custom, to see who among them had angered the gods. And Jonah was identified. They interrogated him. "What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" "I am a Hebrew," Jonah answered, "and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." "What have you done?" they asked him. "What should we do to make the sea calm down for us?" In despair, Jonah answered them, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea. It is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." That idea frightened them. What might such a God do to them for killing Jonah? So they fought on against the storm. In the end, however, it was clear they were no match for God. "Please, Lord," they begged to an angry sky, "do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man. For you, Lord, have done as you pleased." They threw Jonah overboard, and the sea became calm once more. Right then and there, the sailors gained a newfound reverence for this God of the Hebrews. They offered up a sacrifice and made vows to God. A morality tale might have ended right there, simply contrasting the fate of Jonah with the fate of these sailors. But as all of us learned in Sunday school, this is just Act 1. Instead of letting him drown, God sent a fish to swallow him whole. It must have been a very large fish indeed to swallow a man. It also must have been pretty miserable being inside of a fish for that long. 3 days later, Jonah was vomited up on the beach, still alive. And once again, Jonah was told to go and proclaim the word of the Lord. Knowing now that he couldn't run or hide from God anymore, Jonah entered Nineveh as the most reluctant prophet ever. 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overthrown," Jonah cried out as he began his journey through the vast city. 40 more days. People listened. And lo and behold, instead of laughing at Jonah or just killing him, the people of Nineveh actually repented. A fast was proclaimed, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloth, so we read. Even the king covered himself with sackcloth and sat down in the dust. "Let everyone call urgently on God," the king declared. "Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. And as it turned out, God did relent and changed his mind about destroying them. No other prophet in the Bible was ever as successful as Jonah. You might think that he'd be happy with the results. A boatload of sailors and a whole city had repented and turned to the Lord, the God of righteousness. But instead, Jonah was so angry that he couldn't see straight. "This was why I ran away," he cried out to God. "I knew that you were a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. And I am angry enough to die." Now we understand why Jonah had been so reluctant to do what God had asked him to do. They were the enemy, and Jonah wanted them to die. He had been afraid all along that something like this was going to happen. There is a sharp contrast drawn here between a very unfaithful prophet and the faithful response of others around him. The sailors valiantly struggled, trying to save Jonah's life, and thereby proved to be more faithful to God than Jonah was. The city of Nineveh repented, and they experienced the mercy of God, that very same mercy upon which the nation of Israel had always depended. But to Jonah, such mercy given to their enemy was unacceptable. The Hebrew words here actually say it was evil to Jonah, a great evil, and his anger burned. This is the true theme of this short story. It challenges us to recognize that what we often perceive as righteous anger toward those who are evil is itself evil and ungodly. Mercy is in the very nature of God. As Psalm 145 tells us, "The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and rich in love. The Lord is good to all. He has compassion on all he has made." Therefore, for us to hold on to our anger and to thereby deny others, whoever they may be, the possibility of God's mercy is to be totally unfaithful in our witness. And like Jonah, to also deny the very nature of God. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. He does not treat us as our sins deserve or repay us according to our iniquities. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. From Psalm 103. It is simple, really. We cannot claim for ourselves whatever we would deny to others, because God, who provides everything, is the same everywhere for everyone. God will always treat others in exactly the same way that God has treated us. If God has shown us compassion, then we must also be compassionate to others. If we have experienced forgiveness from God, then we must also be forgiving. If God has not treated us as our sins deserve, then neither should we treat others as their sins deserve. It is all there in the Lord's Prayer as well. "Forgive us our sins, for we also forgive everyone who sins against us, and lead us not into temptation." The temptation is to hold others accountable for their sins, all the while claiming God's grace and forgiveness, but only for ourselves. Let the wicked pay for their sins, so we think. Only we get to enjoy the benefits of God's mercy. We should have known that it didn't work that way. We should have known our God better than that. That is not in God's nature, and thank God for that. Our very faith is founded upon the limitless mercy of God for all of his creation. We betray God and we lie about God whenever we deny others access to the grace of God as well. How hard it was for Jonah to give up his anger. In the final act of this short story, God caused a plant to grow up to give shade to his reluctant prophet. The next day, the plant was gone. The sun bore down on Jonah, and he was so miserable, physically and mentally, that he just wanted to die. And the Lord came to him and said to him, "Why are you so angry? You did not tend it or make it grow," referring to the plant. And then God added, "Should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people?" Life is kind of God's thing, and so is forgiveness and redemption. All creation is His, including all people. His love extends to the many, not just the few. Jonah had every reason to rejoice in God's mercy toward so many people, but instead he sulked and nursed his resentment because his enemies had not perished in fiery flames. Instead, God had forgiven them. So, how about you? Are you ready now to give up your anger and resentment and to pray for your enemies? Are you ready to forgive them? Think about it for, say, just the next 3 minutes instead of 3 days, while you imagine yourself inside of a fish. And then open your heart and see where the Spirit of God will direct you to go today to proclaim now the mercy of God. Be safe, and God bless you.